Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm the Badger Reborn, and today I'm going to rank the 10 best Wheel of Time quotes. I recently ran a Wheel of Time quote tournament on Twitter, which was a blast and got a lot of people voting, almost 400 votes for the championship. I'll incorporate that ranking into this video, but not fully. This is my ranking, and I don't fully agree with what the Dragonsworn voted for. This video is of course spoiler filled, so if you haven't finished the series, I would suggest checking out now so you can finish up the books. Honestly, I don't know what you're doing right now and why it is not reading Wheel of Time. I will have some spoiler-free videos soon though. This list was nearly impossible to make because Wheel of Time has so many amazing quotes, whether it be exciting ones, emotional ones, funny ones, or all of them wrapped together. But it must be done, so let's jump into it with number 10. Number 10, by the way, that dress you're wearing is green. Varian in The Gathering Storm. This quote is so iconic to Varian's character and her plotline, and it really stands out. It's a quote that doesn't really mean anything just with a sentence, but everyone automatically knows exactly what it's talking about, exactly what part of the story it came from when it comes up. It's definitely a top 10. I know some people would have it higher than number 10, but I feel like there's not quite enough setup for it for me to put it higher than 10th. Number 9, till shade is gone, till water is gone, into the shadow with teeth bared, screaming defiance till the last breath, to spit in Sightblinder's eye on the last day, which is an Aiel saying. This comes up a few times in this series, and it's such an epic quote. Rand says it, Loyal says it, hear some Aiel say it as well. It's just such a good summary of kind of how the Aiel live, their creed, their lifestyle, and what they really value. Number 8, one of the most fun and exciting quotes of the whole series. I'm a gambler, a farm boy, and I'm here to take control of your bloody army. If you're a keen observer, you may have noticed that my background just changed. Funny story there. I was absolutely convinced that this quote comes from A Memory of Light. However, my patrons have early access to videos, and two of them, MK and Dex, pointed out that it actually comes from The Fires of Heaven. They're absolutely correct, of course. It accompanies Matt's rise to some level of power with the group that would eventually become the Band of the Red Hand. It's an incredibly fun quote, and really encapsulates the way Matt views himself, as well as his general sarcastic attitude. Thank you both for pointing that out, I appreciate it. If you'd like to become a patron yourself and get early access to videos, you can click the link below in the description. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Number 7, It Was About Them All, from A Memory of Light. This one is being used heavily in the TV production, kind of as a way that actors and writers sort of center themselves and remember what's happening in the show and what the priorities are. And that was suggested by the Wheel of Time book expert Sarah Nakamura for the TV show for Amazon Prime to kind of use the quote in that way. And it's such a really cool quote, not just for that reason, but because it really does exemplify how much the characters in the Wheel of Time, besides Rand, who's the main character, but how many other characters have such significant storylines. They all matter, they're all pieces of the puzzle, pieces of the pattern, and their stories are all important. It was truly about them all. Number 6, Kneel and swear to the Lord Dragon, he said, or you will be knelt. Taim in Lord of Chaos. This quote, don't even have to say anything more about it. You know exactly where it's coming from. It's one that always comes up when people think about the most fun quotes from the series, and one of the scenes that people are looking for, including myself, looking forward to seeing the most on screen. The entire Do Might As Well scene is going to be epic, and this quote really just finishes it with a bang. Number 5, not quite as fun of a quote, but duty is heavy as a mountain, death as light as a feather, from Lan. This quote is such a perfect definition of how Lan lives his life and kind of his motto. But of course, as we see as the series goes on, it's maybe not really the best motto to live by. Rand has a lot of trouble due to thinking about his life as being such a duty and heavy as a mountain. And Lan kind of does as well. I think they both learn to sort of embrace a different philosophy by the end of the books, really incorporating love into their life more. But this quote still just has so much power and is used so many times in this series that it's got to be in the top 5. Plus, Lan uses that death as light as a feather part near the end when he's fighting with Demon Dread, and that just caps it off so perfectly. Number 4, I think I have this one higher than most people would, but to me it's just so iconic and just sounds so cool. And it's Let the Dragon Ride Again on the Winds of Time, which is the ending of the Eye of the World. I love that quote, and I think it kicks off the rest of the series. Eye of the World just sort of sets everything up, builds the world, and then it just kicks off the rest of the series in such truly grand fashion. I love that quote so much. I will also get to some honorable mentions. I'll just read through them a little more quickly. And it's just because I can't help it. I can't resist talking about so many more of these great quotes. So just to kind of run through them. Burn me if I expected to be greeted as if I had come to steal a pie, from Matt. It's such classic Matt. Another one, flicker. Flicker, 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 flicker. Such a great, one of my favorite scenes of the entire series. And that quote, you know automatically what it's talking about. Then another one, which kind of relates to one of the ones in the top 10, Ashaman kill. Again, you know exactly where that's coming from and what it relates to. Then one of the funniest ones from the series, as my lord said, my lord's leg is not a side of beef. Thank you, my lord, for instructing me. Which Narum says to Matt. It's so funny. Like, just the cheekiness. And Matt, of course, is not in the mood for being cheeked, which makes it even better. One of the things, maybe the best quote, well, definitely the best quote, I think, from Luz Theron. I would not mind you in my head if you were not so clearly mad. It's just so good. It just turns the whole story on its head. And I love it. Then the next one from Brigitte. What language do we speak, Horn Sounder? When she's talking to Matt, they're talking in the old tongue and he doesn't realize it. That's another, such a good, like, table turning moment. It just kind of flips everything on its head. And you just go, oh, wow. The next one, this one's another really funny one. And I'm looking forward to it being in the first season of the show. The first season of the show. I really think it will be. No one tells us how to be men. We just are. That part from Perrin. And then Egwene says, that's probably why you make such a bad job of it. I just think that's so funny. And it's also just, it like fits with how society often thinks about like men and women. Men don't need to be taught how to be men. Which is just kind of a silly concept, and Egwene calls Perrin out on it. Another one that, a lot of these relate to Matt. This one relates to Matt. But from Tuon saying, a lion loose on the high plains when talking about watching Matt command battle. That's another like kind of goosebumps one. When someone notices how cool your favorite characters are, I love that in books. And Robert Jordan does it really well. Then another Matt one. Sorry, I can't help it. Almost dead yesterday, maybe dead tomorrow, but alive, gloriously alive today. That one finished pretty high in the quote tournament too. The next one, this one was actually used at Robert Jordan's funeral, and it's spoken by Loyal in A Memory of Light. So I think it's a really touching one that really relates to the books. He came like the wind touched everything, and like the wind was gone. That's just such a touching quote. I love it. Another really touching one that did well in the quote tournament. You did well, my boy, you did so well. From Tam in A Memory of Light. And of course he's talking to Rand. That's a really strong, powerful quote. And then the last honorable mention, this one, by the way, sort of a weird story. When I was listening to the book it's from on audiobook, it was getting up to the part I knew it was going to come. This is the first time I'd listened to it on audiobook, though. I knew it was about to happen in the scene. It's one of my favorite scenes. And then it just like was a new part of the scene. And I was like, wait, what happened? Somehow I zoned out and missed my favorite quote, or one of my favorite quotes. So I went back and did it again, and I was like, how do I keep missing this? And I realized just finally, it's not in there. Just somehow my audiobook just doesn't have a paragraph of this scene, and this quote is one of my favorite quotes, and it's not in the audiobook. So I had to use a different audiobook service to buy the same audiobook just for this quote. And I can't help it because it's so good. And the quote is, I don't bloody care about your bargains with anybody else, you daughter of the sands. As far as you're concerned, I'm the master of the blades, and my blades are bare. Which Matt says. Such a good quote, talking to the sea folk who get so offended. And it just, like, of course, it's one of those insults. It's only an insult on the Wheel of Time, but it's so much fun. And you just know exactly that it's super insulting when Matt says it. And it's just a fun scene. Number 3. This one, super iconic. The Wheel of Time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose. And then, of course, depending on which book you're reading, it might go a little bit differently after that. But just starting each book that way, you know exactly what you're reading, you know what you're getting into, and it's so truly fantastic. Robert Jordan is such a wordsmith, crafts passages like this that just completely draw you in. You know exactly who wrote it, you know exactly where it's coming from, and it fits the world so well. So definitely a top 3 quote. Number 2. This quote won the tournament, not surprising, It's definitely one of the fandom's favorite quotes, and it's definitely one of my favorite quotes. I had to put it at top 2. I had to put it number 2 instead of number 1, and I'll explain why I have my number 1 there. But this quote is so fantastic. The quote is this, of course. My name is Nynaeve to Almira Mandragoran. The message I once sent is this. My husband rides from World's End towards Tarwin's Gap, towards Tarmangaiden. Will he ride alone? From Knife of Dreams. I just got goosebumps reading that because it's so fantastic and so epic. Nynaeve's storyline, Nynaeve's whole relationship with Lan kind of culminates in this moment, and there are so many reasons that it's great. For one thing, Lan doesn't want this army. He wants to go by himself, which of course is dumb and stubborn, and he would just die if he goes by himself. So Nynaeve takes matters into her own hands and says, that's fine, you can go by yourself, but I'm going to get you an army, and I'm going to hold Tarwin's Gap truly and help the light win the last battle. I'm going to get an army around you. I'm going to talk to the Malkieri, because I'm one now too. And she goes and does it, and it's so epic. That scene makes me cry every single time when I read it or listen to it on an audiobook, and I'm sure it will in the show too. I can't wait for it, and this quote, just so fantastic. So let's move on to number 1. This quote, number 1, beats out number 2 just because Nynaeve's quote, while fantastic, it only comes up one time, and it's a sort of a specific scene. My number 1 quote comes up repeatedly throughout the series, and it truly personifies the character who says it. Just kind of his whole essence, and it's my favorite character, Matt. The quote is, it's time to toss the dice, or Doviandi Satovia Sagain. This quote is just, it's not as epic by itself, but when you hear it, you know exactly who said it, although Matt didn't say it first. Viren said it first. But Matt, especially with the old tongue version of it, it just comes up so many times, and you know that it's Matt that's saying it. You know kind of that it fits exactly with his philosophy of life, sometimes with battle, and just how his storyline goes. I love how perfectly it fits him. I love how kind of encompasses his whole storyline, and that's why it's got to be number 1 for me. Part of why this quote is so great is that so many characters, they don't say the quote necessarily, but their storylines are so much about taking risks, taking chances, stepping out on a limb when they're not sure exactly where they're going to land or how they're going to fall, whether they're going to succeed, but they're just showing some bravery, taking that step. And Matt's the only one that just sort of knows he's doing that every time, realizes the danger, tosses the dice anyway. This quote is so great. I also put it on my graduation cap when I graduated from college, which kind of adds to why I like it, I guess. So I think it's got to be number 1 for me. Best quote of the Wheel of Time. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, these were extremely hard to rank. I would not at all be surprised if my top 10 is completely different by the time that I get finished editing this video and post it. I might, have read another one of these quotes, or maybe something from outside the top 10 that I feel like I have to rearrange something. But at least for now, I feel like this is a pretty solid ranking of top 10 quotes. But in the comment section, let me know what's your top quote. What's your number 2? Which ones do you feel like I have totally out of order? How do you feel about it's time to toss the dice? That wraps up the top 10 quote list that I've got. Give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more Wheel of Time content. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next time. The message I once sent is this. My husband rides from Emmons... Oh my gosh. And, pardon